I'm going to tell you about the phone conversation that ended my relationship with Donald Trump, destroyed my political career, and proved that some secrets in Washington are more dangerous than others. This conversation happened in September 2025, after I promised Jeffrey Epstein's victims that I would help identify their abusers. And everyone in my congressional office heard every word of it. The call came the day after I held a press conference promising to work with Epstein survivors to reveal the names of people responsible for sexual abuse against women and girls. I had just finished a closed-door House oversight hearing where I listened to these women tell their stories. They were trembling. Their bodies were shaking as they described being raped at 14, at 16, by rich and powerful men who thought they could buy silence along with everything else. I told those women I would help them get justice. I told them their stories mattered more than protecting powerful people who had escaped accountability for too long. I told them that transparency and truth were more important than political comfort and connected relationships. That press conference triggered the phone call that ended everything. I was in my office when my staff told me the president was on the line. I put the call on speakerphone as I usually did for official conversations. What happened next was loud enough that everyone in my suite of offices could hear Donald Trump screaming at me about the Epstein files. He was extremely angry that I had signed the discharge petition to force release of the government files connected to Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking case. He was furious that I had promised to help identify people who had abused these women. And when I tried to explain why transparency mattered, he said something that I will never forget. My friends will get hurt. That's what the President of the United States told me when I asked him to support victims of sexual trafficking, not this will compromise ongoing investigations, not this will damage national security, not this will interfere with justice. He said his friends would get hurt. I was so shocked by that response that I asked him to clarify what he meant. I told him about the women I had just met, how they had been raped as children, how they had spent decades waiting for someone in power to care about their suffering more than they cared about protecting their abusers. That's when he made it clear that he cared more about protecting his connections than supporting their victims. He attacked the women I was trying to help, saying they hadn't done anything to merit an invitation to the Oval Office. He said they didn't deserve the honor of meeting with the president. The women who were trafficked and abused as children didn't deserve the honor. But the people who trafficked and abused them deserved protection because they were his friends. That call lasted about 20 minutes. Everyone on my staff heard the President of the United States prioritize the comfort of Jeffrey Epstein's associates over the justice that Epstein's victims had been seeking for decades. They heard him explicitly state that protecting powerful men was more important than acknowledging the suffering of the women and girls those men had harmed. But what shocked me most wasn't just what he said, it was the tone in which he said it. He wasn't conflicted about this decision. He wasn't struggling with competing priorities. He was angry that I was creating problems for people he cared about by supporting people he didn't care about. The message was clear. Jeffrey Epstein's victims were expendable. Jeffrey Epstein's associates were not. After that call, I knew I could never trust Donald Trump's judgment about anything involving accountability for powerful people. I knew that when it came to choosing between justice and protecting connections, he would always choose connections. I knew that all the talk about draining the swamp was just talk when the swamp included his friends. But what really ended our relationship wasn't just that phone call. It was what happened afterward, when I realized that supporting sexual trafficking victims was somehow more controversial in Republican politics than protecting the people who had trafficked them. I started getting calls from other Republican members telling me to back off the Epstein files. I started getting pressure from party leadership to focus on other issues. I started getting lectured about the importance of party loyalty and political timing and strategic considerations. No one called to ask about the women I had met. No one seemed concerned about the fact that powerful people had sexually abused children and escaped accountability. No one wanted to discuss whether the American people deserved to know which government officials had been compromised by their connections to Jeffrey Epstein. The only concern was protecting the Republican Party from embarrassment and protecting connected people from exposure. That's when I understood that the Epstein files represented everything wrong with Washington. Rich, powerful elites doing horrible things and getting away with it while the women who suffered were treated like the problem for asking for justice. I couldn't be part of that system anymore. I couldn't pretend that party loyalty was more important than supporting victims of sexual trafficking. I couldn't stay quiet about what I had witnessed just to preserve